That sound did not belong here. I recognized it at once, a small, broken moan, like someone fighting for breath. On a deserted road like this, under a noon sun that hammered the cracked asphalt, the only things I should have been hearing were cicadas and wind through the dead grass. But that sound kept slipping in, persistent and faint, and it made my skin crawl. I hit the brakes. Dust rolled up in a choking cloud behind my truck. There was no one, no cars, no figures, just the dry fields that ran to the horizon, and to my right, a row of withered trees, naked trunks, and thirsty branches reaching for the sky like dead hands. I killed the engine. I listened. And then I heard it again. A tiny moan so weak I could have sworn it was only wind trapped between two trunks. But it came again, quivering, desperate. Something was begging. I climbed down. Heat radiated off the road and singed through my leather shoes. I walked slowly, heart hammering. A few steps later, I saw it. A small shadow pressed against the base of a tree where the sun was cut off by gray bark. At first, I thought it was a torn shirt or an old sack someone had tossed aside. Then the shadow moved barely. I froze. It was a puppy. A Doberman pup, black and tan, so thin a strong gust could have knocked it over. Its short coat was matted with dust, each rib a map under the skin. A coarse rope, the kind used to tie heavy loads at docks, was wrapped around its neck and body, cinched so tight the skin was split, dried blood blackening in streaks. And worst of all, its eyes were covered. A filthy, damp scrap of black cloth was bound around its head, blindfolding it. Someone had done it on purpose, not to shield it from the sun, but to stop it from seeing the world that had already abandoned it. God, who would do this to such a tiny creature? My blood boiled. This was not an accident, not a mistake. This was a crime, pure, ugly cruelty. Someone, a coward without a shred of humanity, had brought this pup out here to an empty road under a brutal sun, tied it to a tree, covered its eyes, to let it slowly die. As if that weren't cruel enough, they'd placed a small piece of bread just in front of its muzzle. I could see it plainly, a round bit of bread, a little stale, lying mere inches from its mouth. The dog twitched, its little head shook. Its throat made a dry, ragged sound. It tried to inch forward, body trembling paws, scraping the dirt, the rope pulling taut. A few centimeters more, and it would reach. But it couldn't. The collar was strangling, and it gasped tiny hiccups lost in the noon heat. I couldn't look away. The scene dug into me like a dull blade. Every tiny motion, every frantic breath was a mute plea. I scanned the place. No one. No cameras, no witnesses. Someone had chosen this spot because they knew no one would find it. No mercy. No chance. My knuckles went white as I gripped my hand until my nails bit into my palm. Bastard, I ground out. Whoever did this sick thing, you don't deserve to be called human. I stepped closer. The pup shivered and tried to retreat, but the rope jerked it back, choking its neck. "It's okay," I said, voice low. It caught somewhere in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No one's going to hurt you anymore, little one." It heard me. The tiny ears drooped, breathing still ragged. My throat tightened, and my father's old words echoed in my head. "You can't save them all, Jake." In that moment, I knew this time was different. I couldn't walk away. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen. Because if I turned my back, this creature would die. Alone, in silence, I inhaled, leaned down toward that fragile body, and that's when I saw it. A white paper sign hung dangling in front of its neck. 3 messy words scrawled in blue ink. "Don't feed him." My chest felt like it would explode. I stood silent for a few seconds before the little paper sign hanging at its neck. Those 3 scrawled words hit me like a blow. Don't feed him. The blue marker letters, the paper's edges sodden with sweat and road dust, swung gently with the pup's shallow breath. I didn't know which hurt more, the rope-gouged wounds at its throat or that sentence itself. It wasn't just a warning against feeding. It was an order, a sentence, a cruel proclamation written by a hand that had long since lost any scrap of humanity. Whoever wrote that didn't merely want to abandon it, they wanted the world to ignore it. They wanted it to know that no one would help, that it wasn't worthy of rescue. I bent low. Its breath brushed my hand, faint, rapid burning. The smell of dried blood, sun-cured hide, and raw fear filled the air. The kind of smell only someone who's watched pain to its marrow can recognize. "Don't feed him, huh?" I whispered, lips trembling. "I'll see how well that works." I dug into my jacket pocket and pulled out the leftover piece of bread from my shift, a small, soft scrap still warm from the oven. I hadn't planned on sharing it with anyone, but in that moment I knew it needed it more than I did. I broke off a tiny piece and raised my hand slowly. The pup, pathetic and thin, flinched, recoiling, its whole body shaking, front paws scrabbling at empty air. It couldn't see me. It didn't know who I was. All it had learned while tied here was that hands meant pain. I lowered my voice to something gentle, the way you talk to a terrified child. "It's okay, little one. I'm not going to hurt you." It froze, the small head-lifting ears pressed back. It heard me, but it didn't trust. Survival instinct kept it wary, the only thing left inside its blind, dark world. I knelt and set the bread on the ground just inches from its muzzle. It drew a harsh breath. I watched its ribs rise and fall like a torn sack. It could smell the bread flour, yeast, the scent of life. Its whole body went rigid, torn between hunger and fear. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then I saw its head lower. Slow. Excruciatingly slow, centimeter by centimeter. The rope rasped across its neck, snapping in tiny, dry sounds. It pushed forward, muzzle trembling, breathing shallow. The smell drove it wild, but the tether held. I held my breath. A whisper of wind lifted dust and made the rope glitter in the sun. And then, in that almost hopeless instant, its head tilted, its pale pink tongue reached out, and it brushed the bread. Just a touch. Then it jerked back as if it had licked a flame. My eyes stung. How long had it lived like this? How many days under this merciless sun, with a piece of bread placed before it like some cruel joke? I couldn't take it. I edged closer, hands shaking, my palms slick. "It's okay, baby," I said, voice thick. "Eat. It's just bread, I promise." It sniffed the air, ears quivering, nose working hard. Slowly, painfully slowly, it inched forward again. This time the pink tongue nuzzled the bread, tasted, then swallowed. The piece vanished in a second. It licked the dirt, searching for crumbs. Its hollow belly clenched with each breath. But in that moment, between the hunger, the rope, and the sun like a hot blade, I saw something else. Small, fragile, but real hope. That scrap of bread wasn't just food, it was my statement. An act of defiance. Defiance against the sign, against the indifference, against the idea that a life could be left to die. "All right," I said, quietly, my voice choking. "We're leaving here, I promise." I squeezed my fist and glanced up at the blazing sky. If anyone was watching from a distance, the person who had tied this pup here, I wanted them to know I'd broken their rule. I'd fed it. And in that moment I began a journey I could not turn back from. I dropped to my knees, the dry ground burning through my jeans. Heat shimmered up from the road like fire. The little Doberman still lay there, trembling, breathing in short, shallow bursts. I looked around, no one. Just me, the dog, and the endless drone of cicadas clinging to the scorched trees. The rope was thick, twisted old, tied by someone who knew what they were doing. Tight, layered, each loop biting deep into the skin. Blood had soaked into the hemp, dried into dark, rust-colored streaks. Every time it moved, the wounds tore wider. I took a breath. "All right, Leo, I'm going to get this off you." "Easy now." It heard my voice, its small body tightened ears folding back, every muscle braced as if waiting for another blow. I could feel its fear in the air, sharp and alive. A creature that, small, blindfolded and bound, could only wait to find out whether these hands would hurt it or save it. I raised my hand, steadying my breath, and touched the rope. Instantly, it jerked, choking on a strangled cry, throat seizing. "It's okay. Easy, little one," I murmured, my voice trembling. "Don't be scared. I just want to help." It didn't understand, but maybe it heard something honest in my tone. After a few tense seconds, the shaking eased a little. I started working on the knots. The first was so tight I had to pry it loose with my nails. The fibers were stiff as wire glued to the skin. When I pulled, new blood welled up bright red against the dark rope. I bit my lip to stop the curse rising. God, whoever did this to you, they don't have a heart. The second knot was under its belly, tangled like chains. I had to twist knee pressed into the dirt for balance. Sweat dripped down onto the roots, mixing with dust and the smell of blood. Every time the rope slipped, the pup flinched and whimpered short, broken breaths. "It's all right. Almost there," I whispered, trying to calm both of us. Nearly 10 minutes passed before I freed the loops around its chest. Only one remained, the one around the neck. The most dangerous. I'd have to slide my hand under its jaw. Too close. One wrong move and it could choke itself. I stopped and looked at it. The black cloth still covered its eyes. Nothing could be crueler than forcing a living creature to die in darkness, not even knowing why. "Leo," I whispered, "I'm taking this off too, but you've got to trust me just a little, okay?" Its chest rose and fell fast, but it didn't pull away. I reached out slowly, centimeter by centimeter. When my fingers brushed the fabric, it flinched. I froze, waited. 1 second, 2, then kept going. At last, the final loop around its neck loosened. I slipped it free, dropped the rope and the blindfold onto the ground. For a moment, time stood still. The dog didn't move. I thought it had passed out. Then its head tilted, and for the first time its eyes opened. Amber eyes clouded with dust, and tears blinked against the light. They shifted uncertainly, then found me. That look, I'll never forget it. Not gratitude, not trust, just the gaze of a creature that had crawled out of hell and couldn't believe it was still alive. My throat tightened. "Welcome back, Leo," I whispered, so soft the wind could have carried it away. It exhaled a long, trembling sigh and collapsed onto the dirt. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. I knelt and caught it in my arms. Beneath my palms I felt every rib, and a heartbeat that thudded weakly, slowing with each pulse. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around the fragile body. It didn't resist, just shivered once and buried its face against my chest, searching for warmth, or maybe for a place that didn't hurt. In that moment, I knew. We had crossed the line between fear and trust, between death and life. Dusk had settled by the time I carried Leo to the truck. The last light filtered through the dying trees, laying a soft gold over his thin black body. His small head rested against my chest, breath shallow and warm through my jacket. We didn't speak. We just drove, two silent beings in the hum of the fading day. The road stretched long. Wind slipped through the window, carrying the scent of dry grass and pine sap. I could hear his heartbeat, quick, erratic, but steady. Alive. Every beat whispered the same thing: don't stop. Don't give up. When I got home, I pushed the door open with my shoulder. I didn't want to let go of him. The house was small and worn. One living room, a tiny kitchen, and a wooden porch that faced a yard full of dry leaves. But to me it was peace, what little of it I had left. I set Leo down on the floor. Instantly, he recoiled, trying to make himself smaller as if bracing for punishment. His bony legs slid across the wooden boards, his eyes still unfocused from being newly unbound. I realized he didn't know what inside meant. To him, the world was rope dirt and a burning sun. "It's all right, Leo," I murmured. "This is home now. No one's going to tie you up again." I didn't wait for a response. I knew trust doesn't grow overnight. I grabbed an old blanket, folded it into a small bed in the corner where the desk lamp threw a soft pool of light. Besides it, I set a bowl of water and a few pieces of boiled chicken. He didn't move, just lay there, eyes open, watching my every step. That look heard a mixture of fear and vigilance, like every movement I made might be the next strike. So I stayed where I was. I sat down on the floor, about 10 feet away, leaned back against the chair, took a slow breath, and let silence do the talking. Between us was a space heavy with quiet. Only the ticking clock, Leo's faint breathing, and the wind seeping through the cracks in the door. I let it stay that way for nearly 2 hours. Then he moved, barely a tilt of the head, a twitch of the nose. He was sniffing the air toward me. "Good boy," I said softly. "That smell, it's safe." He looked at me, not panicked now, just cautious. 1 second. 2. Then slowly he turned toward the bowl of water, lowered his head. His tongue touched the surface, and the quiet filled with the soft sound of swallowing. I don't know why, but that tiny sound caught in my throat. I've seen pain before, accidents, war loss, but nothing moved me like watching a frail creature rediscover the will to live. After he drank, he turned his head toward me. For an instant our eyes met, and in them I saw something faint but real, trust, fragile as breath. I smiled barely and whispered a promise. "Sleep, Leo. Tomorrow will be different." I switched off the lights, leaving only the lamp's dim glow spilling across the floor. The wind outside softened. The whole world seemed to hold its breath for his first real sleep. I lay on the sofa, unable to rest. Every small sound he made kept my eyes open. He dreamed, I could tell by the low whimpers, the way his paws twitched as if running. Maybe in that dream he was still tied to that tree. In the dark, I whispered, "It's all right, little one. Even dreams will change." He sighed softly, curled into himself. And in the faint amber light I watched his small belly rise and fall for the first time, not in fear, but in peace. A week later, my house looked different. Not because anything had changed in it, but because there was a new breath of life inside, fragile but alive. Leo still stayed in the corner where I'd made him a bed from an old blanket. He ate better now, drank more water, and sometimes stared out the window as if trying to remember what the world outside used to look like. That morning, I took him to see Dr. Evans, a middle-aged woman with a voice warm as morning coffee. The moment she saw Leo, she froze. "Oh God," she whispered. "Who could do this to something so small?" Her hands moved gently along his back, tracing each scar, each rope mark cut into his skin. The results weren't surprising: severe malnutrition, dermatitis, light infection, and dehydration. But it was what she said next that made her sigh. "The body will heal, but the mind, that's going to be a long road." I nodded. I already knew. I'd seen him tremble just from a spoon hitting the floor or dart under the couch whenever the door creaked in the wind. Once, I accidentally lifted the strap of my jacket, and the moment he saw it, he collapsed. His body went rigid, curled in on itself, and lay still like something lifeless. I'll never forget that sight. His eyes were empty, as if his mind had gone back to that place, the hell where he'd been tied, blindfolded, and left to die. From that day on, I put away everything that looked like a rope, even shoelaces. I learned to move more softly, speak quietly, and close doors gently, because every sound carried a memory, and every memory hurt. I didn't teach him with commands. I taught with silence. Whenever he trembled, I didn't say good boy or it's okay. I just sat down on the floor, back against the wall, eyes turned away. Sometimes I'd sit there for hours until he chose to come closer on his own, sniff my hand and lie down beside me. Not because I called him, but because he chose to. One evening, while I was cleaning the kitchen, a frying pan slipped and crashed onto the floor. The sound cracked through the house and Leo vanished in half a second. He hid behind the sofa, trembling so hard his nails scratched the wood as if pleading for it to stop. I dropped everything and sat on the floor, staying still. I didn't approach. 10 minutes, 20. Then slowly his small head peeked out. His eyes trembled, asking silently, "Is it going to hurt this time?" I smiled and nodded gently. No words, just that small motion. But I knew he understood. That night, while I was reading, I felt something brush against my leg. I looked down. It was Leo. He wasn't lying far away anymore. He wasn't hiding in the dark. He simply rested his head on my foot, trembling, then still. I laid my hand on his back and felt warmth spread through my fingers. A feeling I couldn't put into words, joy and pain intertwined. Because to touch him, I'd had to learn how not to hurt. I remembered Dr. Evans's words, "Animals that have been abused. They don't just need food, they need time to believe kindness is real." I looked at Leo and said softly, "Time, I've got that. As long as it takes." He didn't answer, just exhaled a long, deep, peaceful sigh. And in that moment I knew the fear was still there, but he'd begun to believe. To believe in a world where ropes no longer exist. 3 months after I found Leo, my small house no longer felt quiet. In the mornings when I brewed coffee, I could hear the soft tap of his little claws on the wooden floor. At night, when the wind brushed the porch, there was the steady rhythm of his breathing from the corner of the room. Leo had become the heartbeat of this place, yet I knew a part of him was still trapped back there at that tree on that lonely road. He was stronger now. His black and tan coat shone in the light. The wounds on his neck had healed, leaving only a faint silver line like a thread. He ate well, played gently, and sometimes even wagged his tail when I came home. But a sudden noise, thunder a car horn, a slamming door still sent him crawling under the table, trembling like a leaf. I knew then it was time. Time for him to face the world that had once broken him, and I had to help him take it back. I bought him a soft harness, the kind made for small dogs. No collar, no pressure on the neck, just a light, warm wrap of safety. The first day when I simply held the leash, he froze in the corner, growling, low eyes wide with panic. I didn't push. I laid the leash on the floor, sat beside it, and waited. A week passed. On the 8th morning, as I opened the door, he came closer. He sniffed the leash, his body still shaking, but he didn't retreat. "Good boy," I whispered, my voice trembling with relief. "We're just going to the porch." Not far. I opened the door. Sunlight spilled in. Leo stopped at the threshold. The brightness made him blink. I didn't pull. I just knelt beside him, my hand resting gently on his back. And for the first time since that day, he stepped outside one small, trembling step, but a step toward life. Grass brushed his paws. He sniffed the air, the scent of damp soil, of wind of the real world. A bird swooped over the fence, and I saw its little head tilt, those dark, amber eyes glimmering. It was the first time I'd seen Leo look around without fear. We sat on the porch the whole morning. He didn't play, he didn't run, he just looked, and breathed. And I understood sometimes just seeing life again is its own kind of victory. That afternoon I tried to take him farther, just a few steps onto the sidewalk. But when a truck roared past, the sound sent him bolting backward, the leash pulled taut. I sat down on the ground, released the leash, and opened my arms. "It's okay, Leo. No one's going to hurt you anymore." He stood there panting hard, chest heaving. 1 minute, 2. Then slowly he stepped forward and into my arms. In the pale glow of the setting sun I saw it clearly. The leash was no longer a chain. It was a bridge between his past and his present. From that day on, we went out every morning. First, just to the doorstep. Then the edge of the yard. Then the small road in front of the house. On the 7th day, when I let go of the leash, Leo didn't run. He simply stood still, took a deep breath and lifted his head to the wind. And in that moment I knew he'd won. Not me. Him. He had fought back against the past. He had chosen to live. That afternoon, as I sat on the steps, Leo lay beside me, his head resting on my leg, eyes half closed in the sun. I ran my hand down his back and whispered half to him, half to myself. "The world out here isn't as cruel as you remember." He opened his eyes, looked up at me, and in those amber eyes was a strange, beautiful light. The light of a soul once buried in darkness. Now, learning how to look at the sun again. 6 months later. Spring had come to Asheville. The roads were blanketed in wildflowers and the air felt clean and soft like a freshly washed sheet. Every morning, Leo ran around the porch, strong legs pounding lightly on the wood, his black and tan coat gleaming in the sun. There was no trace of the trembling creature I'd found that day, but the scar around his neck remained thin silver and silent. Maybe that's why today, as I drove down the old road, that empty stretch between 2 hills, I couldn't stop myself from pulling over, the place where everything began. I turned off the engine. The car door opened with a creak and the wind carried the dry scent of grass and dust. Leo sat in the passenger seat, head slightly tilted, eyes glinting under the afternoon light. "Come on, buddy," I murmured. He hopped down. It was still the same place. The old tree with its cracked gray bark stood there quietly, a witness to cruelty. Grass had grown back, covering the scars on the ground. No more rope, no more signs. Only wind and light. Leo stood still. His body tensed for a few seconds as if some buried memory had stirred awake beneath his skin. I held my breath. I didn't call him. I didn't move. I let him face his ghost alone. A minute passed, then another. And I heard him exhale. He lowered his head, sniffed around the roots, then looked up at me. In those amber eyes there was no fear, only calm and something close to forgiveness. He walked toward me, placed his paws on my knees, and licked my hand once. A single warm, slow lick, the kind that said, "It's okay now. We can go on." I smiled, tears burning behind my eyes. I sat beside him, resting my palm on the new grass. "See, Leo. Everything changes, even the places that once took your breath away." We stayed there for a long time. No words, no need for any, just 2 souls. 1 man, 1 dog, sitting in the place that had once been hell, now washed clean by peace. Sunlight filtered through the trees, catching in Leo's eyes. And looking at him, I realized I hadn't just saved him. He'd saved me from indifference, from the quiet habit of turning away. I used to think kindness couldn't change the world. But watching him sit calmly in the wind, I knew the truth. When even 1 person stops to care, the world shifts, even if just a little. That evening, back home, I sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee. Leo lay beside me, his head resting on my leg. The smell of soil wind and life filled the air. Far away, the city lights flickered faintly like stars. I stroked his back and spoke softly. "You know, Leo, they wanted you to starve, wanted the world to forget you. But they were wrong, because now thousands will know your story. They'll remember. They'll stop when they hear a whimper in the wind." He sighed, eyes half closed. I looked at him, then at the sky turning purple. Maybe every act of salvation begins with something small, a broken rule, a shared piece of bread, a heart that refuses to turn away. I set my cup down and whispered not just to him, but to anyone who might be listening somewhere out there. If someone once wrote, "Don't feed him," then let's write it again. Give him a chance. Leo lifted his head, those clear eyes shimmering as if he understood. Then he wagged his tail just once, and somehow everything inside me went still. Night fell. The porch light clicked on. The cicadas went silent, giving way to the steady rhythm of a once-abandoned dog now sleeping peacefully in a world he had learned to trust again. I looked at him and smiled softly. Sleep, Leo. We've won. This story isn't just about one dog being saved. It's about every living soul, human or animal, that's ever been forgotten by a world moving too fast. Sometimes you don't have to save the whole world. You just have to stop, to see, to reach out. Because sometimes one small piece of bread is enough to change an entire life. And if you're still here, still listening, then maybe you felt what I felt that day, that moment on an empty road when you see a small life left behind, and realize that if you turn away, it will never get another chance. Maybe we can't change the whole world, but we can change someone's world. Just like Leo. I'm no hero, just an ordinary man, tired after work who took a wrong turn and stopped. But that single moment of stopping changed everything. If you still believe kindness matters, share this story. Let it reach the ones who might need a reason to believe in good again. And if you've ever saved a life, a dog, a cat, or a person on the edge, leave a comment. I believe in second chances. Those 3 words will travel farther than you think. Subscribe to our channel, leave your story, and help us keep finding those trembling souls and giving them light again. Because every story like this isn't just about animals. It's about us, about how we find our way back to the kindness we lost, about how no matter how cold the world becomes, one small act can still spark a flame. Thank you for stopping, for listening, and for believing. Because of people like you, dogs like Leo still have a chance to live.